We'll discuss each coach's methods to getting the most out of their respective athletes or clients, and how they attempt to change the platform in which they coach. Join us on a fun adventure as we discuss unique coaching styles. Coaching is a universal part of how we get others to get something done. Join your host, Rafael, and his guests on this unique journey in coaching.
Hi, I'm Sifu Rafael, and this is the Coaching Call Podcast. If you enjoy this episode, please subscribe and leave a review. This episode was made possible by listeners like you. Bootsy, thank you so much for joining me on Coaching Call. How are you this morning, my friend?
I'm doing very well. Thank you, Rafael. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. What a pleasure. So we're going to get into who you are. How'd you get the name Bootsy and all this great stuff? Tell me where you were born. And would you say who influenced you before the age of 10, 12?
Okay. Yeah, I was born here in northeast Georgia, in a little college town called Athens, where I actually am currently now. It's not far from Atlanta. And my grandparents lived not too far down the road. They had a nursery, like a plant nursery. And it was their business. And I grew up running around eating tomatoes out of the garden out there and hanging out in Jefferson, Georgia. So it's kind of a country boy running around, going fishing. From the age of 10, I'd say probably my biggest influence was my grandfather. I called him Pawpaw. And he took me fishing and, taught me how to cuss and, all the fun things,
All the good things, huh?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. We played golf and baseball and all kinds of stuff growing up. And so this is where I'm from. This is my neck of the woods. And I love it here.
It's you made me think of a very funny scenario. You're sitting there with your grandfather and he goes, if somebody says something to you, this is how you curse at them. And you use this word, right? That's the image I got when you were saying that. Was it that I'm sure he didn't do it that way, but you probably heard him curse. And then you're like, well, I might as well do it. It's very funny when you see a little kid cursing and they're like 2 or 3. And you're like, what did you just say, right?
It really is. Yeah. And he didn't directly teach me, but he taught me by like slicing golf balls into the woods, you know what I mean? And then I would learn, and he would say, 2 or 3 in a row. And I was like, you can do that? I was like, wait till my friends get a load of this,
Oh my goodness. Yeah. I think that would be a really cool skit. Just kind of funny to have an older gentleman with a little kid and teaching him this is how you curse, right? That would be very funny. So you were not born with the name Bootsy, right?
No, that's true.
Tell us. We're going to get into it. So you were born with the name Owen, right? And it's a great name, but you realized when you got into what you do for a living, and we're going to get into that as well, that you wanted to stand out, right? At what age did you give yourself that name, or did someone else give it to you?
So I got this name, Bootsy Greenwood, which is kind of like my stage name or moniker online, digital avatar, whatever. I'm on Instagram and all the platforms with this particular name because it's my stripper name, if you must know.
There you go.
If people aren't familiar, the way that you derive it is you take the first pet you ever had in the street you grew up on. So we had a cat named Bootsy, and then Greenwood Drive is where I lived. So I was in a pickle because I was trying to put myself out there, do a podcast and do these types of things and then start sort of a personal brand. And my name is Owen Hunt. And if anybody out there is familiar with the show Grey's Anatomy, there is like the main character, his name is, and he's not a good character either. He's a bad guy, It's like, so it's double. But his name's Owen Hunt, the character, the fictional character. So not the actor who plays him, but the actual character. So if you Google my name, then he comes up in spades. And there's also a lot of other Owen Hunts out there. That's a relatively common name. So if you Facebook it, you'll see a lot. So I had to find some way to stand out, and so I just went with this name. And there's I don't think there's anybody else who goes by Bootsy Greenwood. So
Right. That's first I heard of it. You did mention something that kind of caught my attention, and I know it caught other people's attention too. You said it's my stripper name. Let's get into that.
oh yeah, I'm retired. No,
Nice.
that's how it's just kind of a thing. It was like a cultural thing at a certain time where people were like, what's your stripper name? It's it's like, you can create band names
Right.
based off of these fun little kind of games. And so the same is sort of true with the stripper name there. So yeah. Looking for late night entertainment. I'm gonna have to refer people elsewhere, but I do comedy, but I won't be dancing.
I hear you. Considering you said you do comedy, and I know I can already tell you're very funny, because even just the name you came up with, which is pretty brilliant. When did you realize that you were even funny?
That's a good question. I realized at a pretty young age, and I've always been someone who was not really interested in following the rules, so to speak. So adults would tell me when I was a kid, "Oh, you're so funny. You should do stand up or whatever." And I loved Saturday Night Live growing up, and sketch comedy and stand up comedy. My mom let me watch Richard Pryor and Eddie Murphy when I was even very young, so I had all these influences. But I never tried it, because as soon as people were like, you should do it, I was like, nah, if you think I should, then I'm not going to do it. I'll do something else. But eventually, about 5 or 6 years ago, it just kind of finally caught up with me and bit me. And I was like, all right, I gotta do this. I gotta try this out. And so I went and did an open mic, and I did okay. And then I started more consistently doing shows, and and it's been quite a journey, doing that. And that's something that I really enjoy, and I really like. I like producing shows. I produce a lot of shows and a festival here in our local town. So yeah, it's been a really great way to open up a lot of avenues, business wise and creatively. So it's really fun.
What was that first night like when you went to open mic? I've been to an open mic. I was a bystander, if you will. I was trying to laugh at the not so funny comedians trying to be funny. And it was interesting because I was sitting with all the comics, because one of my friends was trying out. He stunk so bad, but there were some guys there that were really, really funny. And to sit with the comics, they were so supportive of each other. Even when somebody told a really bad joke, it was the only table laughing. And you can tell it was like they really wanted to support this person. So what was your first experience like?
Mine was definitely supportive. It was a really warm environment. There was a lot of people there. I had a lot of friends there too who came to see me. I wore a suit.
Really?
That's kind of a joke. And I think one of my first jokes was like something about like dressing up for a funeral, because you never know, kind of a thing. It's like I had never tried comedy before. So my first, I'd say 2 or 3 minutes, I kind of remembered everything. And I was fortunate that I wasn't able to get on when I wanted to, because I didn't have anything prepared. So it gave me a whole month to prepare. And then I prepared something, and I remembered like 3/4 of it, 2/3 of it. And then I kind of got lost. But I really did enjoy it. And like I said, it went okay. Actually, the next shows that I did went much, much worse.
Really?
But it was a very supportive environment and a lot of fun, and something that, we were doing some sketch comedy, and I had done improv before and stuff like that. So I had a little bit of a background, and then I have a background in production. So I was creating prank shows and things like that for quite a few years before I actually started to get out on the other side and started doing comedy. So I'd been a producer for a little while, so I knew a little bit about it. But it was really fun. I really enjoyed it. And then I couldn't stop. So I started really creating a little bit more of a scene and an infrastructure with some of the comedians here. And we have a very supportive community that I'm very proud to be a part of.
Oh, nice. Was it scary?
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's very scary. Well, so I was a musician years and years ago. So like, I was like, oh, I got this thing licked. I've already been a lead singer. I've been a bass player. I know how to be on stage. I've got good presence. But when you go up there and there's no one else on stage with you, there's no instrument to hide behind.
Right.
So like all of a sudden it's just you and a microphone. And then not only that, but people are like, all right, buddy, you said you were funny. What do you got? And they are a brick wall. They're not giving you anything. And you could contrast that with improv. Cause like, I think in improv, people are like, are they going to be funny? So there's this kind of like, a little bit of a buffer there where they're kind of giving you some grace. But as a stand-up, you get none of that. They're like, all right, but what you got? You better make me laugh. I didn't pay at all for this show, so you better be funny. You're like, what's up, dude? How about a little love,
Yeah, it's even worse if you paid for it and they're not funny. Right?
Oh, yeah, it is funny. Yeah, that's true. I find that people are more invested in the show if they pay, but you're not wrong at all.
Yeah. While you're doing this comedy thing, what was your work life like? Were you working during the day, just going at night and trying out comedy clubs and so forth?
Yeah, I still am working during the day. Like somebody made a joke. Comedians are entrepreneurial. We're self-starters. We kind of have to do everything ourselves. My experience being in a band is kind of before the social media movement started. So I assume things have changed a lot in music, but still you had managers, you had venues, people promoting, all that kind of stuff. Whereas in comedy, it's like you have to take control of your destiny. You have to be very much an entrepreneur. So it's really a lot of skills wrapped up. And I'm fortunate to have some of the business skills that I've cultivated over the past few years, because that's helped me to make relationships with venues, promote shows, do all the infrastructure kind of stuff, make good friends with some of the other comedians and network and do some of those types of things. Because without those skills, it's pretty hard. So yeah, it's something that you kind of have to have a little bit of, you have to push, you have to just have that ability to move and go. Nobody's going to just hand you opportunities. You have to go and kind of make them yourself. So the comedians, they created their own day jobs. I say all that to say they created podcasts so they would have a day job and then still work at night. And then I've had several jobs as I've been pursuing this. When I first started, I was doing an Airbnb business that I had started in 2017. And then, so I was doing that by day and then doing comedy at night. And then I was coaching by day. And then I started a cleaning business. And I was doing that by day. And now I'm coaching again. And so I'm always doing something during the day. And I try and write a bit every day for comedy, but my day is generally filled up with other affairs as well. And I like it that way. It's good. It's good for me.
So a comedian really, like you said, entrepreneur, they have to wear so many hats. They have to market. They have to try to get people in the seats, right? They have to promote themselves. So now you have all the social media aspects of it, which are probably very helpful because you have YouTube, you have Instagram, TikTok, all these different things. How do you come across as someone that somebody goes, I need them at my next event? How do you manage that? How do you come across as being funny in a YouTube short or something like that? Or are you taking different clips just to put them out there?
Yeah, I think a lot of people are taking just shorter clips of their sets and then putting those out there. That seems to be like a really viable way to do it. And, it's interesting too, because like a lot of people, are kind of, I don't know, there's like a whole movement where everyone's kind of starting to do the same thing. And so in short, we want to set ourselves apart however that's possible. And so in the world of digital marketing and so much information coming so fast, there's a lot of different sort of angles to approach it. And, you know, for me, it's something that I'm kind of building over time. It's not really something that I'm putting a lot of material out there, because I don't want somebody to come see me and then they're like, I already saw this online.
Right. Yeah.
You know, so there's like this balance, because you want to put stuff out, obviously, but you also don't want to give everything away online. And then someone comes to your show and they're like, I heard all his jokes already, you know? So, you know, when you're building an act, it takes some time. I mean, before the 90s, people were really not, people would have like one act for their whole life. And
Really?
Yeah. And so Jerry Seinfeld was one of the first in the 90s to retire his act. And then when they did the special, they had all these other comedians there as if it were a funeral, and he's putting his bits in a coffin. You know, he's like, this is it.
I didn't see that. That must have been funny.
Yeah, he's like, I'm not doing any of these jokes anymore. And then there's a documentary called Comedian that came out, I think right around the first of 2000s, like early 2000, 2001, about Jerry Seinfeld building his next hour. So he would go into these clubs and try new jokes. Some of them would work, some of them wouldn't. But over time, people like Louis C.K., Bill Burr, Chris Rock, like they became so prolific as writers that they started putting out like a special every year or every 2 years, which was previously unheard of. Because, you know, back in the day, you would just have your hour, and then you would just keep that hour for the rest of your career.
Oh my goodness.
So it's changed a lot in the last 15 or 20 years. But I think that's a good thing overall. You know, it keeps people fresh. And also, I think people see comedians differently now, where it's not so one dimensional. It's like you can be a radio host and a comedian, or you can be a coach and a producer and a comedian as well. It's kind of another offer, right? It's like, okay, well, I'm doing this thing. And then also, if you guys want to come goof around, I'm doing this thing at night. We can kick it and tell some jokes or whatever. And it's like, come see me, come buy a ticket, whatever. Let's have some fun. So I think previously people were perceived as whatever it was that they were. Like, you're an actor, or you're a guitar player, or you're in so one-dimensional, or you're a comedian. And so you always have to be this one thing. But I think that the way that we interact now as society and with social media, it's like it's possible to be many things in your personal brand. Like Joe Rogan, for instance, is a great example. Like if I said, hey, do you know a podcaster that loves talking about aliens and DMT and eats elk and also does comedy? And you'd be like, I know exactly who that person is.
Yeah, exactly.
That's Joe Rogan. And so we all each have that option, I think, to build out our personal brand, to put out into the world what we're interested in and sort of attract those people. And then with it being a personal brand, we can always pivot and sort of rebrand that, which, you know, if you watch George Carlin's documentary, what an amazing person. He had to kind of rebrand his comedy. He had to rebrand himself 3 times during his career. So pretty amazing and interesting. There's a lot that I didn't expect to learn when I got into comedy. But I have really enjoyed getting into it and learning so much about myself and other people.
Your friend Zypher says Swiss Army knife mode. I like that.
You should know something about that.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it's interesting when you said earlier that sometimes you write comedy. How hard is writing comedy?
So I've probably said this before, but if you want to attain enlightenment, sit down at your desk for 30 minutes and try to write a joke with a piece of paper and a pen. You know, it's maddening, you know, because you're going to sit down in logic mode and try and draft or write a joke, which sometimes you can, you know, but let's be real. Most of the funniest things happen when we're being just completely silly, goofy, off the wall.
Right.
So there's a lot of different approaches and ideas when it comes to this stuff. One being to write with other people, which I think is invaluable. You know, a lot of these shows, they have a writer's room where people are bouncing ideas off each other, and that's very effective. The stand-ups, we generally write our own material, so it's a little bit more isolating. You're driving a lot, that kind of stuff. But just as things come, you just write it down. You start to work it out. You start to think about other angles and ways that you can present that idea if you think it's funny, and then you try it out a bunch of times and start to figure out what your process is. The Monty Python gang, they would lock themselves in a room for like 2 or 3 hours and then just go into complete silly mode and then come out and be like, what worked and what didn't, and then go into logic mode from there to kind of trim the fat. And so that seems to be a really good way to generate ideas and material and be playful and have fun. You know, but there's so many processes. I mean, you could see my bookshelf and all the comedy books. I talked to a friend of mine. He was like, "Are you reading comedy books?" I was like, "Yeah." He was like, "Stop." Stop doing that. Because, you know, I think to a certain point, we want to see and kind of cheat off of other people's work, but we don't want to be derivative of another comedian.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. And so you kind of have to establish your own process. But, you know, there's a lot of different tips, tricks, and techniques for writing jokes. And a lot of those will just lead to kind of sounding like a late night talk show host type of joke, which is fine. Nothing wrong with that. But that's just kind of like, and that's where a lot of people start anyway, right? Like 1 and 2 liners and stuff like that. As we start to develop our own voice, which I mean, I'm still developing that, you know, in comedy. You know, there are other things that I'm a little bit further down the road at, but you know, the book Mastery by George Martin, this is like it's 10,000 hours to master something. That's quite a bit of time. You know, that's like 10 years, 40 hours a week.
Right.
And I find that to be pretty accurate. You know, I've got a couple of friends now who I've seen just absolutely just turn the corner and just become so good. And I'm like so proud of them, you know, and you kind of wonder when you're in the dip, you know, Seth Godin's book, he wrote The Dip. When you're in the dip, you're like, is this worth it? Am I doing this right? Why am I doing this? All these
a lot of questions, right?
But then you see other people figure it out and find their sea legs, and you're like, okay, it can be done. I see it can be done. So at least there's some evidence to keep you motivated when you're doing some of these things. But yeah, I mean, it's a very expansive thing, and it's great for public speaking. You know, it's great for being in the moment. It's great for self-awareness, and also it's helped me a lot because I think if I wasn't doing comedy, I would be ironically less honest with myself.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah, because like the spiritual stuff will get you into this sort of almost toxic positivity where everything's good and it's okay and it's fine.
Right,
You know, we're light workers or whatever. And, you know, I think all that is good. I think it's good to be optimistic. But as I get further and further into self-help, I find people like Trevor Mawad, who is a health coach or a mental coach for a lot of football teams, Alabama football team and Georgia football team. Michael Jordan's coach who wrote the book Good to Great. And you start to learn that mindset, how important mindset is, but that sort of like unrealistic, airy-fairy expectations aren't actually helpful. The pessimists do worse, and then the optimists do a little bit better. But there's a better mentality to come from that is a little bit more neutral. So thinking a little bit more neutral and then, you know, embracing wins, as opposed to just expecting everything to roll out easily and be, you know,
that's a huge mistake, right?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, the learning curve is very real.
So how, because humans are so freaking funny. They're so funny. I love watching people. I'm a people watcher. I'm sure as a comedian, you are always, wherever you go, you're like, I'm going to watch these guys because they're like hysterical, right? Especially sometimes a couple or just friends or so forth, the silliest things that people do, right? How have you used that to write some of your comedy?
Yeah, I've always been pretty observant. So, you know, that has certainly lended itself into the writing. And I try to write about myself and my own perspective as well, you know, so that people can understand why I view what I see the way that I do, and that makes sense.
Right.
So it winds up being kind of like a little bit of a loop there. And then so that way hopefully it lands with them. They're like, oh, okay, he's this guy. So of course he sees it that way, you know. And so like I'm illustrating this thing that we all see, but through my sort of POV or filter. And then ideally people are going to, you know, connect with that if they're the right people. And that's another thing too, you know, it's like, as comedians, you know, what kind of comedian are you? What is your audience? What's your target market? You know, all this kind of stuff. We're very fortunate here to have people who have come through and helped us and done workshops and stuff, and like teach us a little bit more about marketing and business and that kind of stuff. Like my friend Karen Morgan, who's a really well-known comedian, and she's on tour right now, but she's helping with the festival. And she came and did a workshop for us and essentially said, listen, guys, you're not competing with each other. Get that out of your head. Like so-and-so might get a spot over you at the Jamba Juice on Tuesday, right? Like, but your, you know, demographic and the people that you make comedy for is going to be different than the demographic that you make comedy for. You need to pick, you know, your target audience is probably going to be within a few years of your age. They're going to have similarities and characteristics to you. Think about those things, and think about those things as you're writing, as opposed to trying to make everyone laugh. I mean, you want to make everyone laugh, but also you want to be really focused and niche down on the people that connect and resonate with you, which is, I think, another benefit of the society that we live in, right? Like if I got a group of people who follow me on social media to come and watch me do stand-up, I think they're going to have an amazing time. Whereas like a normie off the street comes and see me do stand-up, you know, they may not engage as much or have as much in common with me as someone who is familiar with who I am as a person, you know, and what I'm putting out there.
I'm wondering how if comedians even say, I need a captive audience. I know, a nursing home.
Yeah, there's nursing home shows. There sure are. And they pay. I mean,
Yeah.
So yeah, absolutely. There's a guy here in town, Big Al. He does a bunch of nursing home shows, and it's awesome. I mean, I've never done one of those. He's asked me to do a couple, and I've just been busy. But they're early in the day too. But several
because otherwise they're sleeping.
That's right. You got to get in the nursing home by 4 p.m. But you can do like 6 mics in a day. You know?
I started watching that show Landman, right? And if you've seen it or if you haven't seen it, the ex-wife who becomes the wife again decides that she's going to do some good things. So she goes to a nursing home and decides to take these old people to a strip joint, which I think is hysterical because when they all leave the strip joint, they're back on the bus. They're all sleeping, right? Because they're exhausted. I thought that was pretty funny.
They've all got broken hips from all those lap dances too, you know?
That's it. It's a very interesting show. One of the things that, like even Big Bang Theory, right? What is really fascinating is when they hit the punchlines and it's like perfect, and they don't make a face or anything like that because it's supposed to be straight up kind of humor that we get it, but they're being serious, right?
Mm-hmm.
How does that have you done stuff like that nature? And you talked about improv before.
Yep. Yeah, I would say improv falls into that. There's kind of 3 different categories of performance that I've experienced that I would kind of classify comedy, and improv being one of those where there's definitely a fourth wall. You know, the improvisers on stage, they don't know that you're there laughing at them, right? Like they don't.
Right.
And then there's clown, which sounds like somebody painting it's not somebody painting their face, but European clown is a traditional kind of presentation of comedy, which is kind of like sketch comedy, but it's interactive. So there's no fourth wall, or the fourth wall is broken. So the clown comes out and you've got some bits that you do, you got some things but you're playing to the audience. So you're directly engaging with the audience. And if something's funny, then you just double down on that and you play with the audience. And then you've got stand up, which obviously, you're talking directly to the audience. So there's no fourth wall there. So there's, and then sketches also, there's a fourth wall that's not broken. So you're just pretending like the audience isn't there. So those are kind of the main ways to do it. And obviously, you can break some rules here or there if it's fitting, but generally those are the approaches. And I think that's maybe what makes stand up so hard is like, and the audience knows, like you're face to face, like you're kind of facing off with them. And so it's a little bit different with the clown thing. You can really play with the audience and just tease them, and if you find something that is funny, which they come out and they have a set of beats, they kind of know where they're going to go. But during that time, there's this kind of open space where you can really engage and have fun and just play with the audience. It's really, more like play than any of the other forms of comedy, but they're all useful too. And they all kind of help you understand yourself in context, connect with the crowd, connect with the audience, feel the energy of the moment and just play with that, which is really cool. I think we need to play more. The fact that those Monty
I agree.
guys would just lock themselves in a room and God knows what would happen in there. And then come out and be like, okay, what was funny, what wasn't? I love that approach. And just
that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's a practice in vulnerability.
When one of the things that I've noticed is that you can tell me if I'm right or wrong on this one, but I think comedians think about a joke and probably practice that particular joke thousands of times because maybe a word needs to be taken out, replaced with another word. So wordsmithing is so critical to a joke, right?
It definitely can be. And it really depends on you and your style of humor. Like there are those precision surgeon comedians who just like every single word matters. And then you've got, people who kind of rely more on the attitude of the joke. And so they may present it differently with different words over the course of a couple of nights if you saw them again, but it would be the same idea kind of coming through the joke. So, someone like Louis C.K., very specific, it's like this word, every word is in perfect place. And it's,
right.
They say cutting syllables are a lot of what we do, right? Like you simplify an idea and bring it down. If you can get like a 2-word joke, that is like, so good. And then you got somebody like Bill Burr, who's really, it's his attitude that kind of carries his act. And so he may kind of circle around the joke and do it in a different manner from night to night. The idea being the same, but he might twist it up and it might have like a little bit different presentation. The delivery might be a little different. The setup might be a little bit different. And the words that he uses might not be quite so precise. So
right.
It kind of depends. And then you've got the crowd work comedians too, who are just like, they're playing in the moment. Like they're just playing off of whatever people are saying, or sometimes they have stuff pre-written too. Like you'll be in the crowd, you'll be like, what do you do for a living? And the guy will be like, I'm a server. He'll be like, a lawyer. And then they just launch into the joke, So yeah, the words are very important. I'll say this too. You'll hear this as a kind of a counter argument that like 85 to 90% of our communication is nonverbal. So there is an element of that too in the presentation. So the words are very important for sure in comedy and public speaking. But if I present something and deliver it with no emotion versus high emotionality,
it's huge.
It's a big difference. Yep.
Yeah. I'm thinking of the silent movies, right? Charlie Chaplin, who came out with all the the body mechanics, if you will, the way to make people laugh, the facial expressions, and then we go all the way to Jerry. Um, which Jerry am I thinking about? Um,
Jerry,
uh, who did MD muscular dystrophy?
uh,
Jerry.
Jerry Lewis.
Yes, thank you.
I was gonna
I
guess
almost
that
said
or
Jerry.
Seinfeld.
I was gonna say Jerry Seinfeld, but I'm like, no, yeah, he did more like yeah, Jerry Lewis for sure. And then you have Kramer and you know in that show, who was hysterical. The way he just walked in with his hair all puffed up, it was hysterical because it's the entrance, right? It's people just laughed every time the guy walked into the room,
It's true.
right?
Mhm.
Or even Taxi, right? If you remember the guy with the hair too, so funny.
Andy Kaufman.
Yeah, such incredible body mechanics that certain people just have, how they portray a joke, right?
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah.
When you do your comedy, how much of your physicality is involved?
Well, that's a good question. I haven't thought about it that much. I try and just allow my body to do what it naturally does. So I have a lot of gesturing. I am very expressive. And then I make, some facial expressions and stuff. But as opposed to watching myself in the mirror and like being so particular about it, I
Right.
try and just feel the emotions. And then my body naturally should do whatever that gesture is. And so that it's less contrived, I guess, and just more natural. So, yeah, I sometimes there's some awkwardness, sometimes there's some exuberance, excitement, and then yeah, you can always double down on the tension when that happens by acknowledging it. But I try and just let those things kind of come out as naturally as possible. When I first started, I was like, well, I've got to get everything, blah, 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 blah. And then now I fly a little looser. I just, I don't know that it'll always be that way either, because we're always developing and iterating our style and learning more and experiencing more. But, sometimes some aspects just aren't coming. And it's crazy. There's several different skills that are involved. It's like, I thought it was one skill, but it's like,
Right.
if you were going to learn tennis, you got to learn an overhand serve. You got to learn a backhand, all these things. And then comedy's no different. You've got to learn, how to be comfortable on stage, have good stage presence, how to speak well. You got to project your voice. You got to, be a good writer. You've got to do the stuff with your body if that's part of your act. I mean, some people just stand there and they just tell the joke. Other people are like Sam Kinison. It's like,
No,
right, very
so
loud
funny.
and very expressive. So it really it's a lot of different things to play with when you kind of get in there. My third year, I was like trying all kinds of weird stuff just because I didn't know what would
Right.
land and who I was. Still, I'm, like I said, still developing, but it's fun.
What I guess you're not no longer wearing that suit, right?
I don't wear the suit anymore.
It
Nope.
was a one-time deal.
Well, no, I tried it a few times and I thought it was really funny, to go to an open mic all dressed up, but it's not like a persona or like a character that I really was like playing or anything. I just wanted to mess around and try different things. It was really about that. And like, it's not that I wouldn't wear a suit if the show was, if it was appropriate to wear a suit,
Right.
but if I'm going into some, dingy bar, brewery or something, and I walk in there with a suit.
Wearing a suit,
Yeah.
that might be funny by itself.
Exactly. That's kind of what I thought at the time. I mean, Steve Martin says you should always look better than they do. But most of the places that you do comedy, it's not hard to do that. Just wear a shirt. We're in Georgia, dude. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I hear you. I hear you. You talked about a lot of great comedians. When you consider, and you talked about you have all these books, and your friend said, "Stop looking at the books, be more you." Right?
Mhm.
I think that's such an important aspect. because then you'll never be known as you if you're portraying other people. You also talked about the production aspect of it. What excites you more, getting up on stage or the production aspect, the behind the scenes?
It just depends on the show. If it's a new show, then I'm more excited to be behind the scenes. But, I am working to perform as much as is humanly possible, and then also take some breaks, to kind of rearrange things creatively, work on writing, those types of things. So being able to be a producer and be like, okay, cool, I'm just not going to perform this show. I'm just going to work on producing the show, the coordinating of the event. Sometimes it's nice because you don't have that added pressure. It's like a lot of those shows, it's like you host, you run the door, you book all the comedians, you make the flyers, you connect with the venue, blah, 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 all that. And you still have to perform. So sometimes it's really hard to juggle.
That's a lot of pressure, right?
It's a lot of switching, because you're like, you're switching from this very logical run of showrunner position to, okay, be funny, right? Like just like that. And so you got to go kind of back and forth between those two parts of your brain. And so that can be kind of tricky, but I think also it's good for you, push your boundaries, stretch yourself, but yeah, I like both a lot. And I've got a knack certainly for the production stuff and a lot of experience in that. Like when I was doing prank shows, I mean, I've got skills that are pretty bizarre because like it was like a lot of challenges, a lot of things to be creative and problem solve and logistics that were very specific. Because like on a prank show, the people getting pranked obviously can't know that they're being pranked.
Right.
So you've got all these hoops to jump through. It's not your typical event where you're like, hey, here's an event. You're going to come here and do this thing and blah, blah, blah. And it's all laid out. You've got to be like, hey, so we need some brand ambassadors for this hot dog company, or whatever. And then you get people out under this guise or ruse. And then if they can't see like a wire, they can't see like, you know what I mean? If there's a tip off, if there's a production van or a camera or someone who looks like got gloves clipped to their belt buckle, you know what I mean? Any of those things are a clear tip off. So you've got to figure out how to make sure that people don't catch on. So that gave me a lot of skills as far as the production side of things and made me really confident to go out and create events. So I love that part. I think the creative problem solving part of it is probably my favorite.
Nice.
So when it comes down to it, especially if there's a team, I love working with other people too. So that's another part of it. So yeah,
that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. When you talked earlier, you talked about you did different day jobs. You did coaching, then you do night stuff, and then you kind of stopped that, but then you came back to it. So now you're coaching again. And Cypher here says that he remembers your coaching call fondly. Talk to us about the coaching and the type of coaching that you actually do.
Yeah. Well, I'm really passionate about coaching. I'm really passionate about particularly purpose, people finding goals, finding their reason why, really finding what it is that they feel like they're here to do, what they're here to give the world. I want people to exemplify themselves authentically and express that and basically give what their talents and abilities lend themselves to the world in a win-win scenario, a win-win, win-win-win, right? Like everyone should benefit and the world should benefit as well when we really show up as ourselves, when we show up authentically and give our gifts, so people benefit and so the world gets better. So that's my main focus, is helping people find goals and to help them get on the path to their goal. For me, I found a book that really tied the room together quite a few years ago called Reality Transurfing. And it's a bizarre name of a book, interesting and super mysterious and stuff. But it was written by a Russian quantum physicist named Vadim Zeland. And so I got into that book in 2016 and it completely changed the way that I viewed the world. Previously to
Really?
that book. Yeah. I read a lot of spiritual books, and they say a lot of the same things, but the way
Right.
that this author presented it, it was just it was a perspective shifting experience for me. And I really needed it at the time. So I generally use that as it's a good one. I generally use that as my sort of map as far as the techniques that he presents in that book, because it talks a lot about manifestation and sort of new agey principles, but in a much more practical and scientific way, because he was a quantum physicist. So I'm not a quantum physicist. Let me just say that first off the bat.
Me neither.
But I found a lot of what he talked about in that book and a lot of the examples and metaphors that he used to be so helpful, in the mechanics of the manifestation sort of process versus new thought and kind of law of attraction stuff that I'd heard before. He talked a lot about particularly how things can go negative. Why is it that it's so hard to get the things we really, really want? And why is it so easy to get the things we don't want? Why is it that the things that you don't want always come to you in spades, that they're just so easy to accumulate? And so he talks about that, and he uses the example of importance. In Buddhism, they call it detachment, but I think importance is maybe a better word, because it's like detachment seems so inhumane. Like
You're leaving everything.
Right. It's like there's nothing there. You're just like the separate thing. Whereas it's like with importance, it's like I can reduce it. I can limit how much I'm emotionally invested in this thing, but I still want it. You know what I mean? Like, let's be real. And so the whole idea of the book is aligning heart and mind, which we're two parts as human beings. We're soul, or subconscious and conscious mind. And those two elements, I didn't know previously, could actually be in working together in unison, in harmony with one another. And so that's where charm comes from, where attractiveness comes from, radiance, really authenticity, and all those things that are very attractive and that kind of, allow us to set ourselves apart and be the individuals that we are, as opposed to trying to be what other people think we should be, our biological drives, our egoic ideas and needs. We kind of can learn to start to break away from those, as he talks about one of the ideas in the book called pendulums, where he's talking about basically collective energy structures, and we can kind of externalize some of the ideas, thoughts, habits, addictions, etc., that we feel like are internal, and see kind of how those energies themselves are drawing us in and keeping us from really being our individual selves, our most authentic. So a simple example might be something like a sports team. You get so obsessed with the sports team that you really lose your own identity. I've seen grown men throw chicken bones at other people because they were wearing a different color shirt than the other guy, And so you realize that we kind of connect to these energetic things, and then we basically start to act on their behalf. We become an adherent to the pendulum, is what he calls it. And then we kind of lose our own identity. And so the point of the book is to really be who you are, to allow yourself to be exactly who you are, embody that, and allow everyone else to be exactly as they are. And then as we kind of dig down and find our gifts, find our goal, then we put those into action, leverage those. And then all of a sudden we're in this more natural state of giving our gifts and doing the things that feel good for us, that we're good at, that we enjoy, and that the world needs. So a little bit of ikigai in there too, where it's like what you're good at, what you love, what the world needs, and what you can be paid for. There's a little bit of that in there. But that's kind of how he explains the model. And it made so much sense to me because I didn't realize. I thought you either had to be a broke
one or the other.
Yeah. Or you had to be like a very analytical pencil pusher type. And I was like, well, I guess I'm just doomed for all eternity to just be a broke. So it helped me to align my own elements, and then that's really what I am trying to impart and coach and help other people discover for themselves. And nobody can do it for you. You have to do it for yourself. They're the ones who do it. but I love being able to be in a position to help them draw that out and find their conclusions.
I love it. I love it. You made me think earlier when you talked about somebody in a sports team that they lose themselves, fanatics, right? It's funny because the other day I was watching the game with my fiance, the Bills, and she's like, you know, I haven't seen anybody without their shirt off because usually it could be blizzard weather and somebody out there doesn't have a shirt on because they devoted themselves to this team, so their health no longer matters, even though it's freezing out. And yeah, you're not going to get sick for 5 minutes outside without a shirt, but you stay long enough, you're going to freeze, right? So she said, "Look at that! In today's game, we didn't see any fanatics." I'm like, "Yeah, that's interesting." When you everybody people paint their faces, so there is all different kinds of levels that people can get into when it comes to not living their own life because they're trying to say, I stand with this person or this team or this idea, this concept. What's next for you, besides comedy, the production aspect of it? Where do you see yourself 5, 10 years from now?
Yeah, that's such an interesting question. I was thinking about that the other day, and I talked to a friend of
Mm.
mine, and he was like, "Are you serious?" He's like, "Can you really imagine? Can you really even guess where you're going to be in
Mm.
5 years?" And I have some ideas, right? But
Yeah.
golly, if you would have asked me 2 years before I did stand-up comedy if I was ever going to do that, I would have been like, no, man, people told me I should do that. And I would never do that. Right. Like, and
Right,
then
right,
2 years
right.
later, I'm like, oh, I want to try
You're
this.
in it.
So as I continue to develop, I love what I'm doing. I love what I'm working on. And I see continuing to work in this industry and coach and do some of the things that I'm doing here, and then just expanding from there into some other modalities. I've really accumulated quite a bit of tools
Mm.
that I am excited to share. Like the model is kind of, like I said, it's sort of my bread and butter. But when you crack into it, there are definitely some sticking points and some things that, like, he's like, oh, drop importance or limit importance. And you're
Mm.
like, okay, well, how do I do that, bro? So like,
Yeah.
these are the types of things that I've been exploring on my own, right? Like, allow yourself to have is one of the things that it talks about in the book, right? But how do you actually set that up, right? Like, how do you eliminate self-sabotage and actually allow yourself to have? And how do you go after something without getting in your own way, and et cetera, right? So there are quite a few things. And I think all of these models, they're really communicating the same things in different words, and we're doing our best. But I see myself expanding into that realm. I've written a couple books, and
Nice.
more like summary type of books and stuff, and like reintroducing some older concepts. Maybe I'll do my own. Maybe I'll start, kind of having my own bent on some things and creating that. And then also, just making like stuff that I think is really cool, like making, some sketches that I think are fun, maybe some books that I think are cool, some revision type of stuff, and then also creating some original works as well. So, I mean, that's kind of where I see myself. I don't have when I set goals, I don't really use a metric like an external outcome as much as is humanly possible. I try and focus on the process of that goal and focus on doing what that is. So for me, as far as like being a comedian, right? Like, my goal is to be good. Like, if I'm at the Rib Shack or if I'm at the Comedy Store, it doesn't matter. As long as I feel, like I'm doing a good job and I'm enjoying it and it's fun and people are laughing, then success, and then
That's it.
the same with coaching. Right now I've got a school group that's doing really well. I'm really proud of that. I'm building a community there, and I've built communities on all these different platforms, but I think that I finally have found one that I think works really well for what I'm trying to do. It's engaging the school platform and community there. So I've got that open right now, and that's something that I'm working on. And what's cool about it is that I know that I'm going to discover things and have opportunities that I can't even conceive of. The book, he talks about the idea of outer intention, which is a little bit different than inner intention, which is like me. Outer intention is more like this win-win idea. And so when we start to open up to allow ourselves to have and receive and connect with people who might be in our community, all of a sudden opportunities come up that we never really conceived of. I didn't think I would be an owner of a comedy festival. I never thought that would happen. Right. But like, because I pursued what I was passionate about and interested in, then that opportunity presented itself as something that was a door. It wasn't something that I was like, I'm going to do this thing.
Right. It just
not on my
came to you, right?
Right. So, but because I was in the position that I was and creating the infrastructure that I did and producing these events, well, then all of a sudden people approached me and said, hey, what about doing a comedy festival? And I was like, I mean, I'd be open to it. What's up? So we start talking about it, and then I start talking to, other people. And then, before too long, we've got a team and we're doing it. So
Nice.
things come up that you can't know to expect. It's like, I got offered to go on cruise ships and do comedy, like on the Impractical Jokers cruise ships and Kiss Cruise and all this stuff. I had no idea that was even a possibility, but I just haphazardly sent my friend a silly message one day on an app called Marco Polo. I don't even think it's still around, and sent him a silly video. And then he was like, hey dude, do you want to come on the Caribbean and be on cruise ships and work on? And I was like, yeah.
Right.
I would have never known that to be an opportunity. So,
you get to vacation and work.
It was so fun. Yeah.
What a great deal.
Great company. Yeah. I had an amazing time doing that. It was really great experience for me, and to be able to see that whole world. So yeah, I say all that to say, I'm going to keep down the path that I'm on. I feel like I'm on the right path for me. And then as things pop up, opportunities, then I'll hopefully judiciously decide what to pursue and what not to.
It's very interesting. This morning I did a show called Opportunities Ahead. And just because it's an opportunity doesn't mean you have to take it, right? Some are good, some are great, some are like, get away from me. I'm not going there. You also talked about podcasting. Do you have a show?
I do. I have a podcast called Blue Collar Mystics. I really enjoy connecting with people and talking to them about spirituality in the most practical way. That's really what my niche is. I'm here from Georgia. I was born here in Northeast Georgia, but I grew up in West Georgia. It's a very country spot as well. And so the way that I grew up was just like around a lot of blue collar people. So for me, being able to describe this stuff in a simple way is needed, helpful, and fun. Like, I like to take like some crazy esoteric concepts and be like, look, dude, this is all this means, like, this isn't a threat to you. It's actually a way that reality works. This is a natural law. That's what we're studying here when it comes to spirituality, is how the world works, what reality is. And so, not being a quantum physicist, I can still recognize patterns.
I love it. Bootsy, thank you so much for coming and sharing your concepts, your ideas, your comedy with us. And I'm blessed that you took the time today to do so. I'm going to give you 30, 45 seconds. Tell us how people can reach you. I'm going to have your website going across, and what can they expect?
That's awesome. No, thank you so much, Rafael, for having me. It's an absolute pleasure and a really fun chat. Thank you. Yeah, people can find me all over the place at bootsygreenwood.com or Bootsy Greenwood on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. I'm on all the platforms under that moniker. And then my podcast is Blue Collar Mystics. I also have a school group that you can check out. It's the Transurfing School. So if you go to school and you check that out, or if you can find it on my website as well, it's there. And right now, at least until the end of the month, it is free to be admitted into that community. And you can kind of start to check out some tools and resources and see, what resonates with you. And if it's something that you're interested in pursuing, then I am leading a book club at the end of the month as well,
Nice.
where we're kind of going to go through the book and break everything down. And that's going to be a lot of fun. So I'm really looking forward to that. So just building community. You find me, Bootsy Greenwood, happy to be of service. Shoot me a message or DM me on one of the platforms. I'm pretty active on Instagram and YouTube. I'm making at least weekly videos there. So you can also
Nice.
find the podcast there. So thank you so much.
Oh man, what a pleasure. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Have yourself an exceptional day. Everybody, do me a favor. Share this episode with your friends, family, because not only did we learn so much from Bootsy Owen, who really has pursued something that kind of like he was not wanting to do it. But once he gave in, he's helping people just with a smile, a laugh. I think it's a huge endeavor that you've taken on. So thank you for doing so.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity to connect.
Yes, absolutely. Everybody have yourself an exceptional day, and we'll see you next time. Take care. If it ends, we'll try to end the stream.